we lived. 11:30 approached, and everyone was sitting in their overinflated impact chairs watching a video projection showing the countdown until the interstellar interloper flew past the Earth. An orbital telescope even managed to capture great views of the object as it approached at 8% of the speed of light. What the enhanced images revealed of our visitor resembled a long bluish-gray cylinder. Wow, exciting, huh? There was also a live view from a surface telescope that was tracking the flyby. Since the object was moving so fast and was so dark against a dark, star-filled night sky, the AI added an illuminated red overlay to help track its motion and passage. When it happened, it took only about 20 seconds for the object to appear and depart. The enhanced image showed the red line of a linear trace which resembled something between a slower-than-normal shooting star and a very fast satellite. The orbital telescope tracking the object showed its shifting color from blue-gray to a more reddish hue as it passed by. How the interloper could have managed to get a good look at the Earth while traveling at that speed was beyond me. The good news was that it did not explode, nor fire death rays at us, nor eject space-borne smallpox to shower us with death pimple doom. The bad news, or possibly indifferent news, was that it had not responded to our message transmission in any way. It remained dead silent. No radio or laser pulses, nothing detectable at all. Maybe it had fizzled out during its long journey. Regardless, at 1 in the morning, a global, "Maybe we are going to live" message was broadcast. Test. That was my translation for the AI's vague message relaying nothing important. The update broadcast still recommended that all humans remain in shelters for at least another 6 hours. That worked out well for us as it would be 7 in the morning when the restriction was lifted, and this meant we could go to bed down here and emerge topside when we woke to greet the dawn. With the threat now lessened, Angelina, Chelsea, and the indent Liang helped me carry the younger children from their cramped impact chairs to the bunk beds, which the androids had prepared earlier. I was impressed at how strong Liang's waif-like shell was, as he was able to handle the smaller children with ease. A few of the older kids were still awake and stumbled themselves into their own bunks after visiting the toilet. The adults had cots waiting. Beatrice and Jess were still in virtuality following any new information which trickled in. I left it up to their own augments to put themselves to bed, or not. Sahun took a cot next to her indent. I noted that she held his hand for a moment before rolling over to go asleep. What a strange situation that was. Soon we were all in cots and snoring away. I slept in the next morning. The late night filled with the anxiety of waiting for our deaths from the interloper, combined with the hours of me bearing my soul and reliving past nightmares to Jess, had exhausted me. When I awoke, everyone was gone, except Beatrice and Jess, who were still sleeping in their cots. I sat up quietly so as to not disturb them. "I have prepared fresh clothing for you, John. It is waiting in guest room 14 up in the surface dormitory. There you may shower and dress as you will. A buffet breakfast has been provided in the annex if you're hungry." I sub-vocally thanked Omu and noticed that the bunker hatch had been left open. I was surprised that I had managed to sleep through all the kids and the other adults waking up and leaving. I had to take a leak, but that could wait until I was on the surface. It was time to get out of here. Chelsea was about to leave the complex when I made it to the annex for breakfast. I spent a moment saying goodbye to her and wishing her luck on her historical reenactment. She had inquired if I would be visiting the camp again, and I had to let her know that I was probably leaving the area soon and not likely be returning while it was active. We parted with her giving me a long hug and thanking me for the tour of my acreage. She also thanked me, with a bit of embarrassment, for sending Angie to her camp. I looked around the annex and spotted the other humans in the dining area. I grabbed a plate of food and coffee and joined Sahun and her indent, who were sitting at a table next to Angelina. "Good morning, John. Last night was quite something, wasn't it?" Sahun asked. I sat next to Angelina, who reached over and gave me a quick hug. "Yep, we're still here though, so that's good." Angelina and I were just discussing that the incident will probably wake up the Denier segment of the population. The Deniers were this era's flat earthers. Humans. You can't live with or without them. Some of them, sure. The others will probably claim that the warning and flyby yesterday were a fabrication and doubt the whole thing even more, I said. I spent a few minutes focusing on eating while the others finished up and sat chatting. Angelina reached over and rubbed my arm. We saw that you spent a bunch of time talking with Jess in private last night. I took her statement as a question she had really meant and answered, yes, he finally got me to talk about the accident that happened in China 9 years ago. I think it helped. I feel better today about it at least. Sahun looked sympathetic. Being that she had been involved with my grandson when the accident happened, she was probably intimately familiar with the family gossip about how I had reacted. Well, I am glad, Angelina said with a big smile. She looked sincere. What are you going to do now? After my talk with Naomi last night, I'd been thinking about just that. The AI's suggestion of an updated mind data scan was a good one. I was also considering the suggestion of a new shell. It was waiting at my winter home in the Seychelles. It had been a long time since I had been on a warm ocean beach, and the idea sounded very fine right now. I will probably head to my isolation lodge in the Indian Ocean. I need to either replace this shell or have some invasive medical work done to it. Recovering in the warm sunshine on a peaceful beach sounds like a pretty good idea, I explained. Oh, John, Heels in the Sand is such a lovely place. Ben and I spent a few vacations there, Sahun said. My extended family had had a standing invitation to use any of my leased properties, so the revelation did not bother me. On the contrary, I was glad to hear that the place was being utilized. Her statement also meant that the island retreat was still being maintained. I guess the AIs would have seen to that in my absence, regardless. Sahun continued, John, I planned on leaving my Falls Overlook Lodge in a day or two. Hearing about your island retreat makes me crave some time on a warm beach. If you are going there, would you mind if I tagged along for a short stay? Of course, Liang would accompany me. I know you have a nice set of guest suites in a separate beach cottage there, so we would be out of your way. I saw Angelina perk up at that. I wondered how long Omu had commissioned the girl to be my therapist and companion. I thought about Sahun's request while I finished my last bite of eggs. I would not mind the company, and as she had said, the place did have ample guest accommodations. Also, I had Uxi's invitation to visit her on Vesta still lingering in the back of my mind. It might be a good idea to have a short beach vacation before I left the planet, as it might be a long while before I returned. I nodded to Sahun. That would be fine. How about we leave tomorrow night? That way we can sleep during the flight and get some of the jet lag out of our system. I'll also invite Beatrice and Jess to come along, since they are only here because of me. I turned to my touch therapist and asked, and how about you? Would you like to spend a little time on the beach? She accepted my invitation with an eagerness that went beyond just the chance for a continuing paycheck. It was clear that she was not a fan of the mid-October climate here in Old South Dakota. I was back at my acreage sitting on the deck sipping coffee when I spotted Beatrice and Omu walking over the hill from the field base. It was mid-afternoon and we had skipped our normal after-lunch poker game. Jess and Beatrice had still been sleeping in the bunker when I had finished my breakfast and made my exit. Sahun and her indent had flown back to her isolation lodge to prepare it for their departure tomorrow night. I had checked with Omu and found that the electrojet currently stationed at the field base would be available tomorrow evening to shuttle our group halfway around the world. Jess had contacted me a short while ago and said that he was returning to his normal practice. He had mentioned that he would like a follow-up session with me in a few months. I had agreed that I would if I was still on the planet. 10 minutes ago, I had heard the whine of the jet taking off, no doubt to shuttle him back to where he had come from. Omu and Beatrice had made it to my drive. I went into the kitchen to fetch a cold bottle of water to offer my human guest when she arrived. When I returned to the porch, they were within conversation distance. "Good afternoon," I called out. "Good afternoon, John," Beatrice said. "I missed you when I finally woke up this morning. What a night that was." "Yes, it was interesting," I replied. She thanked me for the water and took a seat on the porch step. It was a sunny fall day and warm enough that I had my jacket off. Omu took a seat also. It could have stood all day if it wanted, so I suspected her action was for the benefit of us humans. I spoke with Jess before he left. He explained some of what you discussed with him last night. "Oh?" was my nonchalant answer. "Yes, he relayed enough of what had happened between you and Omu here, and Naomi, I guess. He said that you three had reached a compromise of sorts, or maybe a balance at least." I thought for a moment, Yes, I think that you could say we have. After the historical learning expedition, I was angry and half insane with what had happened, and I needed some time to come to terms with it. I may have gone too far over the edge, but now I am getting better. She just nodded. We sat there enjoying the sun for a while in silence. I will be going back to Luna soon, so if you don't mind, I'll accept your offer to ride along with you when you go to the Indian Ocean. After a few days on the beach, I'll hop over to the launch base in Somalia and head back to the moon. I said that I would love to host her for a few days at my island. She had finished her water and now stood. Well, I'm going to head back to the annex for a while and begin to get my body clock set to the 10-hour time offset. The implant helps, but last night has messed me up already. I'm going to bed until we leave, then stay up for the flight. I heard you were doing it the other way. I nodded. I planned to sleep during the flight and use the implant to wake me up early once we arrived. Okay, I'll see you later. Oh, I just remembered. Angie said she will be here in a few hours, she said as she walked away. Omu remained on my porch. Angelina was coming to spend the night. We had planned to spend the evening in the lake cabin. If the night were calm, maybe there would even be an outdoor bonfire. If not, there was always the wood stove in the cottage to keep us warm. Tomorrow morning, Chelsea would be stopping by to say goodbye to both of us. I intended to let her have access to the lake cabin over the winter. It would be a good backup to her camp, and I knew she would enjoy the occasional unbroadcast warm shower if the cold weather got to be too much for her. I spent a bit of time chatting with Omu. We talked about the pending mind data recording session. I frowned when I heard that I would need to have my long gray hair shaved off. With the cranial injuries I had suffered in the cave-in, I would need to use the external data pickups just to be safe. The android also teased me by describing the fit, young clone shell that was waiting in the deep freezer at Heels in the Sand. I tried to convince myself that I would miss my current grizzled old shell, but the truth was I was ready for a change. I had replaced my shell enough to know how amazing it felt to shed decades of wear and tear in an instant. I could have had the machines rejuvenate this one to a youthful condition, but I did not want to spend a decade in biosuspension as my body was regrown to be like new. John, what would you like me to do with your old survival gear and homemade clothing from your nomadic existence? The android asked, interrupting my thought. What did I want with that gear? At the moment, I had no intentions of running off and resuming that lifestyle. Although doing so in the slightly more familiar surroundings of North America would be interesting when compared to the wilds of Central Asia. There were fewer neo-bears here after all. No, I did not want to keep the gear. I don't want it anymore. You can dispose of it. Would you mind if it were retained here? Eudemonia's historical sub-presence has expressed an interest in constructing an exhibit in the museum barn, which covers the years of your Asian self-imposed exile. The android had asked that last very quietly. It possibly feared my reaction. Did I mind? Not really. I'd suppressed much of the preceding short decade, but it would probably be an interesting exhibit. I was not sure of exactly how far I had wandered or my overall route, but I do know that I had covered an impressive distance of terrain. I'd kept moving constantly in great circling patterns, focused around the eastern Gobi Desert, southeast in the winter to the wetter areas of China and northward up into Siberia in the spring. It would be nice to see it on a map someday. I would also be interested in how they explain the reasons behind my departure. That would be fine, Omu, I answered. Would you like me to prepare a meal for yourself and Angelina tonight? Or do you wish to do your own cooking? She asked next. I smiled. I had just spent nearly 9 years eating campfire food. Please prepare a meal. We will eat it at the cabin. Check with Angie on what she would like. I would like seafood. And maybe have the makings for s'mores on hand in case we do have an outdoor fire. I thanked the android, and she departed to leave me in peace. Angie and I were waiting in the pool of light at the foot of the entry stairs to the electrojet. She had a small travel case while I had just the clothes on my back. Just as I was about to send a message, a freshly awakened and still tired-looking Beatrice appeared at the brightly lit annex exit. She looked around and yawned before spotting us and beginning to walk our way. Behind us, Sahun's hopper was approaching to land on the paving beyond the jet. I could hear it, but could only see its flashing landing lights because I had not brought my night vision goggles. The sun had set over an hour ago, and it was now cold and windy. An early winter storm was due to arrive later tonight, so we were getting out of here just in time. Soon we were all aboard the Electrojet. There were 6 passengers, including the android this time. Our seats were spread out, as 4 of us planned to sleep during the flight. Beatrice planned to stay awake, so her and Omu's seats were up front by the refreshment station. We assumed our takeoff positions and were airborne moments later. The high thrust kept us pressed into our seats and grunting out our breaths for the 3 minutes it took to get the jet up to its cruising altitude and speed. Our course was northeast, and at over Mach 3, we would likely be well over Canada and approaching Greenland before we were fully asleep. The trip would take only a bit over 3 hours, so we would be using the implants to quickly reach full REM slumber. Omu did one last check on us and configured our seats into horizontal beds. Soon I was dreaming about the stars as we flew on just below them. Omu woke us by gradually brightening the cabin a few minutes before we started descending. I had just gotten my seat back in the upright position and taken a few sips of the coffee I had been handed when the Electrojet banked around to the left. Out the port windows, I saw the blue of the Indian Ocean come into view. I leaned forward and saw my island just ahead. Heels in the Sand was the name I had assigned to the place when I had first completed the lease agreement over a century ago. It was to have been mine for 99 years, but a petition on conscientia had been passed which granted me an unlimited lease. The only stipulation was that if I died or left the planet forever, the island would revert to the historical sub-presence to be converted to another historical tourism site. From the air, the island looked much like I'd remembered it. It had been known as North Island, or Île du Nord, to use the more common French name, back before the reset. It was a 2-square-kilometer island in the inner island group of the Seychelles archipelago. The island's location was 8 kilometers north of the larger Silhouette Island and 30 kilometers northwest of the largest island in the Seychelles, Mahes. To the northwest, it was 1,200 kilometers to Old Somalia, Africa, and the same distance to the south-southwest was Madagascar. Despite it being only 4 degrees south of the equator, the small island had a very temperate climate, with the oceans keeping the highs and lows not more than 10 degrees each side of 80 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. Angelina was awake and processing by now. She turned to me and said, "Wow, nice island. Looks warm." "It averages around 80 degrees year-round," I replied. She looked at me funny for a moment. "Oh, 27 degrees. Why do you still use those old-style archaic measurements?" I felt a bit embarrassed. I didn't want to reveal that I had switched to the old-style units after the China accident, simply because I was having a childish temper tantrum when I had fled the AI and humanity. The mental struggles I had had converting and switching units had eventually eased until that was again how I had thought of those measurements. For the same reason, I had reverted to using the old AM and PM 12-hour time segments. I suppose I would have to switch back to the normal 24-hour method now that I was again around other humans. But to answer Angie's question, I half-lied. "Oh, it was just something to keep my mind occupied when I was gone." She just nodded and turned to continue watching our landing. I watched her observing the island and smiled when she grew excited as the 2 large white sandy beaches and blue lagoons came into view. The island was 2 kilometers long by 1 kilometer wide, with the major axis running from the northwest to the southeast. Towards the southeastern end was a large, solid rock outcropping which projected into the ocean about 300 yards. Immediately to the northwest of the rock was the largest beach on the island, and was also the one most often sheltered from the ocean waves. When I had first leased the island, I found it a bit too exposed to the open ocean, so I'd worked to deal with the mining sub-presences who were extracting undersea metallic nodules in the deeper parts of the Indian Ocean to offload their smelter slag onto a barge controlled by Naomi. Then the AI sintered the slag into tetrapod riprap and deposited it a half-kilometer offshore from each of the island's 2 beaches. This went on for a few decades until the island was left with 2 near-perfect lagoons. The northern lagoon also had a small rock-lined boat marina, with a dredged channel leading from the shallows out to the deeper water past the reef in the new submerged riprap breakwater. On the other side, the rocky peninsula to the south was another smaller and more intimate beach. The 2 beaches allowed fun seekers a choice of 2 water locations and conditions. My main house was located on top of the rock outcropping, a few hundred feet above sea level. It also had lower levels that bored deep into the solid rock. These provided many secured utility spaces while keeping the upper, visible parts of the house much smaller. What was visible was a large circular great room with glass walls which provided a sweeping 270-degree view of the ocean, starting at the northwest, swinging around to the east and ending towards the southwest. There were also smaller windows facing the west, which had views of the island's trees and grassy flat areas. Aside from the rock outcropping on which my lodge was constructed, there were two other raised topographic features on the island. The tallest of these was a tree-covered hill on the far northwestern end of the island, which rose to an elevation of over 500 feet above sea level. A similar but shorter hill was on the closer southwestern side of the island at around 400 feet elevation. Both had paved paths leading to their summits, with the taller hill having a small, raised gazebo structure to admire the view. The Electrojet landed on a paved pad, which was located on the island's flatter central section. This half-kilometer square area was close to both beaches, but still high enough above sea level to keep it safe from flooding. It was nestled in a saddle between the eastern rock promontory, on which was constructed the main lodge, and the raised geography connecting the other two hills. It also lay between the two beaches and served as the central core of the island complex. Located here next to the landing pad was a garage and hangar structure, which contained a few ATV-type land vehicles. There were also a pair of Vatolhopper aircraft, which had enough range to get you to the larger nearby islands. Well, I assumed these were still in the garage. I'd not bothered to check on the inventory status of Heels in the Sand with Omu before we left. I was sure she would have informed me of any issues, however. I was about to ask if any of my family or other guests were staying on the island, but decided not to do so and just be surprised if that were the case. Also near the central landing area was a large meadow of natural grass, a swimming pool and spa enclosure area, and an outdoor exercise and recreation area. There was also a smaller beach cottage near here, located along the path leading to the northern beach. The grassy meadow areas were fenced away from the human activity areas because the island had a small population of giant tortoises. Some of these had been alive when I had first built the place and looked about the same today. I looked forward to meeting my old friends if they were still around. The jet spooled down and we rose to our feet to disembark. The aircraft's main hatch opened and allowed the warm and fragrant tropical air inside. I let the others go first and Sahum led the way. Since she had been here before, I realized I could dodge host chores and simply rely on her to show the others around. Give them the full tour, Sahun. I'm going to go use the toilet in the beach cottage, I said, and then made my escape, heading directly for the cottage and its facilities. As I walked away, I saw her begin by pointing out the amenities near the landing area, which included all the outdoor recreation activities typically found at a world-class resort from before the reset. I made it to the beach house. Since the main lodge was 1,000 feet away and up a few hundred feet on top of the rock knoll, the beach house was much more convenient to anyone swimming in the lagoons or playing on the outdoor facilities. The walk between the two houses was very pleasant, and the view from the switchback trail was even better. There was also a small two-way tube shuttle to whisk you to and from both residences if you were in a hurry or too tired to walk the trail. Omu joined me in the beach cottage when I had finished my business and freshened up. I suppose you are eager for me to have the mind scan done, I asked. Yes, but due to the sleep and jet lag chemicals still affecting your brain, you will need to wait for at least 2 hours, the android replied. Good, I want to go for a swim. Can you help see to our guests if I slip away to do that? I instructed. Omu departed to do those host duties while I went to the cottage laundry area to ditch my clothing. I had just gotten undressed and had found a pair of swim shoes and a large towel when I remembered something. Oh, Mo, I didn't notice when we landed. Which beach is better for swimming today? I asked subvocally. I believe you would better enjoy the northern beach today, John, she replied. Off to the north beach I went. I probably made for quite a sight with my wrinkly, pale white old body bouncing its way down the beach trail to the north beach. It occurred to me that if I were going to swap into a new shell soon, I wouldn't have to worry about getting sunburned in this one. I came out of the tree canopy-covered path to find the northern beach was even more of a tropical paradise than I remembered. The sand had been recently groomed and cleaned of seaweed and other washed-up debris. The water in the lagoon was like glass, as this side of Heels was sheltered from the light trade winds typical for late fall. I planted my towel in the sand and waded in. That first swim in the warm ocean water was like heaven for my tired old body. After a few minutes of swimming, I waded back ashore and found a snorkel and mask in the small beachside shed where we kept the beach accessories and safety gear. For the next half hour, I floated and swam slowly back and forth over the crystal clear waters of the lagoon, watching the colorful sea life swimming and crawling below. I saw a large shadow on the seabed approaching my location and looked up to see Angelina swimming over to join me. She smiled as she approached. "Oh, John, this is a wonderful place. Thank you so much for letting me tag along." She flipped over and began doing a slow backstroke. I could not help but admire her well-formed breasts as they broke the water like two perfect islands. My eyes kept moving down her body as she floated past. Wow, I was definitely getting that younger shell. I tore my gaze from her perfection and noticed that beyond her the other women were coming down the trail from the cottage. Sahun was fully nude, while Liang and Beatrice each wore gauzy beach wraps. Liang's pale waif shell would burn very quickly, I realized. And Beatrice, having recently come from the tunnels of the Farside lunar station, would also be sensitive to the full sun. Omu followed behind them. The android was carrying a small cooler with beverages and a few extra towels. I smiled when she set the items down in the sand and waded into the lagoon. The android was slightly denser than water and had to keep her arms and legs moving rapidly to stay above the surface. When she had motorboated herself to the area where Angie and I were floating, the android stopped swimming and simply sank to the bottom. I watched her through the mask as she inspected the area and kept watch on the undersea life. I was sure there were other aquatic drones on patrol further out near the reef. That was standard procedure when any humans were in the water. In addition, some of the larger boulders on the lagoon floor were in fact stowed rescue drones. They would wait there patiently and then spring into action if needed. My kids had needed them more than once, until they had learned to be more careful. I paddled my way to the shallows. Sahun and Liang had entered the water wearing swim goggles and looked to be ready to swim laps up and down the lagoon for exercise. The taller woman had wonderfully bronzed skin, toned muscles, and fine features. The shorter waif-like shell which Liang was wearing made me a bit uncomfortable as it resembled the shell of a younger teenager. Old prejudices die hard, I guess. Later, I was lying on the beach on a large towel watching the others swim and play in the water. I was also enjoying a fruity beverage that did include some alcohol. I excused this by the fact that other than water, the booze was all there was in the cooler. Omu joined me. She sat directly on the sand as her android body would repel the sand once her synthetic skin had dried. "Are you enjoying yourself, John?" she asked. "This is wonderful, Omu. I can't tell you how much I miss this." "I am enjoying it too," the android said. I glanced over to her. She must have noted my raised eyebrows. "I translate my reduction of worry as enjoyment, John," she explained. Since my eyebrows remained raised, she explained further. Reduction of worry as in no neo-bear packs constantly on the prowl. No boreal tigers either. Ah, that made sense. I was now in safer, more controlled surroundings. She could relax some from her constant protection duties. "Did you have to kill a lot of bears?" I asked nonchalantly, before taking a sip of my beverage. 457 over an 8-year period, she answered, causing me to choke on my drink. Enough so that eudaimonia did not have to introduce culling for the entire region. Now that you are no longer there, other measures will have to be introduced as the neo-bear population is nearly out of control in northern Asia, she continued. Wow, I'd seen a few carcasses, but I had had no idea that total had been that high. We sat in silence for a few minutes. My mind drifted from our talk of the bears to all that had happened since I had asked to be brought out of Mongolia, the new people I'd met, and the changes that had occurred. After recalling the time we had spent in the bunker almost 2 days ago, and my discussion with Jess, which had taken place that night, something occurred to me. I have not been keeping up on the news. "What's the latest on our interstellar visitor?" I asked Omu. "Not a whisper, John. Minerva's has continued to track and observe the object as it travels out of our solar system. The interloper is continuing to depart at 8% of light speed and is currently 25 AU from Sol, or roughly at a distance equal to halfway between the orbits of Uranus and Neptune and the Sun. So far, it has not acted in any detectable manner. Too bad we can't catch up to it with a probe or something, I mused. Actually, Stellix and Praxia collaborated on a crash project to deploy a high-thrust interceptor craft using stage torches for boosters. It was concluded that if Minervus had detected the interloper only 7 hours earlier, the effort might have been feasible. As it was, the object passed by the inner solar system too quickly to attempt such an interception, Omu explained. I had not known that. If we had managed to pull that off, it would have been an impressive feat of fast response. Another 5 minutes passed in silence as we just enjoyed the wonderful surroundings. Omo broke the silence when she said, John, based upon your somewhat lascivious stares towards your female companions as they frolic about unclothed, I suspect that I was correct in assuming you would want your stored younger clone shell ready to receive your mind data after the recording session later today. I actually had to think twice to make sense of what the android had just said. At least I did not choke on my drink a second time when I finally understood. Well, I guess you do know me pretty well, Omu. I decided to swap out my old shell about 20 minutes ago, I stammered. If the sole reason for your desire to swap is to enhance this old shell's performance for coitus, I can provide pharmaceuticals which would remedy your current deficiencies, Omu offered. This time I did choke a bit. Damn it, Omo! I looked at her and caught a flicker of a grin on her illuminated face. The little shit was messing with me. No, I think the younger shell will suffice, Omu. Well, the clone is based upon your genetic makeup after all. It is possible that the pharmaceuticals might still be required even after your shell swap. Just let me know subvocally. I can sneak you a patch if you find yourself unable to rise to the occasion. The little minx! I could not help it and started laughing. When I finally calmed down, I reached over and touched the android's leg. It's good to have you back, Omu. We sat in silence for a while, just watching the others play in the water. The sun had risen as noon approached. I loved the warmth that soaked into my exposed skin. Omu got up, had me roll over, and then straddled my legs. Her magic fingers began to gently massage my shoulders and back. The pleasure of her touch, combined with the remnants of jet lag, had me dozing within minutes. The 5 of us had a wonderful lunch at the beach area cottage. Afterwards, we split up, with Sahun and Liang planning to stay at the lower beach cottage, while Angelina, Beatrice, and I took the main house up on the rock outcropping. We used the tram tubes to make our way up to the main house instead of hiking the winding trail, mainly to demonstrate to the visitors how to use the faster option. The girls loved the expansive view from the lodge's great room level. The space was circular at over 20 meters across. I had decided, grudgingly, to start to morph back into metric units. Its exterior was ringed with tall glass panels which sloped outward at their tops, providing great views, both of the horizon and downward to where the water met the rock breakwater of the island. Along with a large seating area on the ocean side, the great room level also had a fully functional kitchen and dining nook on the west edge. Access to the great room level was by a wide central spiral staircase, extending up from the ground floor level below. The ground level sat just above the surface of the rock outcropping and had the lodge's main exterior entry along with 3 bedroom suites. The central stairs also continued up from the great room level to a circular rooftop terrace. This outdoor space covered the entire lodge and was open to the sky except for the central stairwell core, toilet room, bar, and kitchenette. There were clusters of comfortable seating areas with 3 separate gas fire pits around the edges of the terrace. Finally, there was an outdoor shower and spa to round off the rooftop amenities. With it being a mostly outdoor space, the terrace had electrostatic insect repellers lining its perimeter. Those, combined with its height above the island's vegetation below, made the terrace perfect for lounging around after dark, weather permitting, to watch the stars and the bioluminescent sea life in the ocean waters surrounding the island. For daytime use, some of the areas had retractable awnings to block the equatorial sun. Once I had shown my 2 guests their rooms, yes, I gave Angie her own quarters to be polite, I excused myself to have my mind scanned. I had told the women that I would be having a mind data scan and would also be having some work done on my shell. Hopefully, the shock of a new, younger shell would not be too much of a surprise when I returned a few hours later. I entered the lift that formed the center of the spiral staircase and descended, traveling 100 feet below the rock floor of the lodge's ground level. Deep down in the rock which formed the knoll was the reinforced service and storage bunker. Here was one of the island's redundant DET power receivers, along with other utility equipment such as our fresh water makers. There were also storage rooms with supplies and a long horizontal tunnel which ended at the main garage where we had landed earlier. In the garage, there was replication and fabrication equipment to make what was needed if we lacked something in storage. One of the secured rooms in the bunker also contained a full medical ward, and this was my destination once I exited the lift. Besides a sophisticated medical mobile unit or autodoc, there was a ring of 4 medical creches. One of these already had its lid open. I stripped off my shorts and took a seat on a stool so Omu could shave my head. She left my trimmed beard in place as it would not interfere with the mind scan. While she removed my hair, she reminded me of the new features I would find in this new clone shell. The new shell had an improved cranial web, which would allow for faster mind data access and scans. I would be able to enter virtuality as deeply as almost everyone else now could. Also, this clone had dual smart irises. Omu explained that they would work exactly like my fully organic eyes until I activated them. Then they could perform all the functions of the goggles I'd always worn in the past. She recommended that once I was in the new clone, I wait a few days before trying either of the new features. That was fine with me, as I was not as excited about the shell's new features as I had been back when I had authorized the clone to be grown 15 years ago. I also learned that my old shell would be stored in biosuspension for the time being, as there was a storage unit currently unoccupied. While it waited, it would be medically repaired. Ohmu asked what age I wanted it reverted to. I said to leave it the age it was, as maybe I would have need for a more mature shell at some point in the future. After the shave and a depilatory treatment on my scalp, I spent some time at the mirror looking over my now smooth skull. Omu pointed out the scars from my cave-in head injuries and how the scanners would have to work around them. I learned that the scan would take a bit longer as they would be covering certain damaged parts of my brain with triple redundancy. My implant would keep me in a semi-sedated state to keep my brain activity stable while they did the multiple scans. Soon it was time to hop into the creche. Before I did, I faced Omu and put my hands on her shoulders. I am trusting you with my very being, Omu. Trusting you like I once did. Do not make me regret it. No memory edits or mental adjustments. Are we clear? Very clear, John. This will be a direct scan and transfer only. No changes will be made, Omu assured me. I do have one minor suggestion, however. What is it? I asked, suspicious. I would like to add to your memories the additional operation instructions for the new shell's smart irises. That made sense, so I amended my demand to allow it. With that bit of unpleasantness finished, I climbed into the medical creche and Omu began applying the data pickups to my head. She then gave me a mild sedative to keep me calm and prepared to close the lid. Last chance for me to adjust you mentally to increase your robot fetish, John? She asked. I chuckled. Not this time, Omu. Your new tits are doing that job all on their own, but I'm not sure I could handle you. The lid shut and the interior lights dimmed to a soft blue glow. I closed my eyes and hoped that I was not a fool for trusting the android again.